Hello, welcome back to the Fundamentally Fit podcast with me, your host, Andy Strong, and a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to wherever it is that you are listening to this podcast. It's episode number 1. It's that time of the week. It is time for the Fundamentally Fit podcast, and we have got a absolutely jam-packed agenda today. We're going to be talking about the topics that matter the most. Is your grandma making your children fat? Yes, that's right. It's in the news this week. We're talking about it. Are indulgent grandparents bad for your children's health? This one is by no means a hot potato, but we're going to jump in and we're going to talk about it anyway. And actually what we're going to find is a lot of crossovers to the podcast we did a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about Joe Wicks and his chocolate woes. Not to keep going on about that, but actually when we jump into this topic, very, very similar, although it might seem worlds apart. Then we're going to have a little chat about moderation perception. We're going to have a chat about red cups, because red cups are back. Starbucks and all of your favourite high street chains, or not favourites if you like, are releasing their Christmas ranges of drinks this week and their festive foods. So you need to be careful, because some of these bad boys are laden to the brim with calories and fat and sugar, just waiting to undo all of your hard work. Now, I'm not here today or any of these podcasts to tell you that you shouldn't eat things, or just to point out the obvious that certain things are bad for you. I'm here to kind of make you more aware, help you understand where you might be going adrift, and more importantly, giving you some more practical suggestions as how you can make better choices in these scenarios. Christmas drinks, red cups, all of those things, classic things I see every year with my clients. They slip up, they get caught out, and then when you basically go through why they're getting caught out, they're generally quite surprised. So I'm going to share that information with all of you lovely people today. Then my big parting gift to you to set you up for success in the holiday season as it starts to draw in on us. And we're going to be doing a few weeks of kind of tips and advice on how you can survive this festive season. I'm going to tell you how you can drink 12% less wine with zero willpower. That is the big takeaway. That is the ultimate gift to you today. 12% less wine, zero willpower, closer to your goals, and hopefully save you a little bit of money as well. So, should we jump in? Should we do it? Should we do episode number 21? Right. Indulgent grandparents. Are they bad for your children's health? I'm going to shuffle my papers like a proper newsreader. Right. This was a study. It was printed onto the BBC News website today, 15th of November. And a university in Glasgow has published a study in the PLOS One journal. And it suggests that grandparents are often inclined to treat and overfeed their children. Stop the press. Grandparents have a tendency to overfeed their grandchildren. Nobody knew, but they've done a study, and now we must jump into it and we must find out why. Is it because they're grandparents and they like to make their kids happy? Anyway, the study also found that some were smoking in front of their grandchildren and also not giving them sufficient exercises. So while we can kind of have a bit of a poke at fun of this, because it's like grandma's making the kids fat. Of course she is. She's being grandma. She's doing what they do. My gran, or my nan, was a massive feeder. She used to make her coconut ice, among other things, was absolutely legendary, and it still gets talked about in our family even today. Not that it definitely wasn't a health version, that's for sure. But this study, although we kind of can poke fun at the headline, was actually looking at grandparents who were basically one of the significant primary caregivers for children in their early years. So this is when grandparents are looking after the kids a lot of the time, and they basically have an overriding influence on that child's health for those early years. So when they're doing it while mum or dad are at work, and they're just kind of there supporting, but because they're in that supporting role on a regular basis, they're obviously having much more of an impact, because they're in that home environment or that caring environment, and therefore are the occasional treats that you might get from your grandparents when you see them maybe once a week or once a month, which kind of don't really matter. Are they being kind of a little bit more damaging to your kids if your kids are being looked after your grandparents all the time? And according to Grandparents Plus, which is a charity, grandparents are the largest provider of informal care in the UK, and in their opinion they need to be better recognised but also better supported. Now, the charity's chief executive, Lucy Peake, said that grandparents want to be the best, grandparents want the best for their grandchildren, and the more they're informed and more enabled they are to play a positive role in their grandchildren's lives, the better things will be. Now, this is really quite interesting because it's not something that I guess people step back and have a think about, because childcare is really expensive, and certainly that's not going to be a topic for this podcast, but childcare is expensive. That's a big influence on people's budget, how much money they have to spend on healthy food, exercise, all those different types of things as well, how much money they've got to spend on their kids to create a healthy, happy home environment. And grandparents can make it possible for a lot of people just to get to work, or to basically ease the burden that it can often be trying to balance work and home life. And that certainly is something that comes up a lot with my clients. And actually, although in the first instance you might think, this study's a bit like throwaway, we kind of knew that, what's the point of that, it does raise a really important point, because healthcare is so expensive in this country, or childcare is so expensive in this country, then it is important that we make sure that grandparents have support that they need to make sure that, when they're looking after the kids, they're getting enough exercise, they're getting what is a balanced and healthy meal based on today's standards, not maybe what they're used to from a long time ago, and also not being in that environment where they're just overindulging the children's needs and giving them sweets and treats and things to keep them happy because they're the grandparents. And obviously that's their prerogative. A lot of grandparents want to do that. I know that's what my mum and dad do with their grandkids. But it's a really, really interesting one. And what a lot of this comes back to, and I'm not going to talk about this study too much because this study really is a springboard into the other topics of today's podcast. Now, we talked about Joe Wicks and the environmental problems that he was having. So he'd put on weight, he'd lost his motivation because he'd been in LA, and we talked about how actually it was his environment that had changed, and how his environment being in LA was different to his environment at home, and how his environment at home would be set up for success, and now the portions are bigger in the States, his routine has changed, all these different things. And if we think about this in terms of your grandparents or your parents might be looking after your kids on a regular basis, then you need to think about that environment, because that environment will stick, and a lot of those early habits that your kids are going to pick up, good or bad, are going to stick for a long, long time. And one of the ones that I always have a conversation with clients, I've done it 3 times this week, has come up, and this one will resonate, I'm fairly certain, with 99.9% of people on this podcast today. How many of you out there have had a parent say to you, "You can't leave the table until you've finished everything on your plate"? Now, that is a simple line that is drilled into the vast majority of the population, but it's one that sticks. It's one that we carry forward today. We still act on it. I think 92% of the food that you serve yourself, you will eat. And the vast majority of that, or not the vast majority, but a lot of that can be attributed to the fact that we have a lot of these ingrained environmental habits and learnt behaviours that come from our environment when we're younger. And you have to remember, kids are easily influenced, and I'm not saying the grandparents are bad or they shouldn't look after your kids, but maybe spend a bit of time with them to help them understand what is the home environment that you're trying to create. Is it one where sweets and snacks are readily available, or is it one where they have to have them on a certain time frame? Is it one where they're encouraged to have fruit and veg? Is it one where they're encouraged to go out for a walk a couple of times a day down to the park so they get their exercise? Just a couple of interesting things to maybe consider. And what a lot of this can actually come down to is down to our perception on environment, but it's also down to our perception on moderation. And moderation is this kind of concept that's been taken out of context. So everything should definitely be in moderation. Yes, you can have an alcoholic drink each week. You can have something sweet to eat with your after your dinner. All of these different things can be balanced out. But are you getting enough exercise? Are you eating well most of the time? It's that kind of 80-20 rule. 80% of the time you're eating and being really active, eating well and being really active. 20% of the time kind of balance out where you're doing the things that maybe aren't as good for you. Balances out over time, okay? But a lot of the problem with moderation, and this is probably where a lot of grandparents and a lot of people go wrong, is that things have moved on an awful lot, and our perception on moderation isn't in touch with that of reality. And a really, really good example of this is things like McDonald's, for example. A Big Mac and fries with a medium drink will be around roughly 1,100 calories. Now that is, for most people, over half of their daily calories, sometimes pushing closer to 2/3, depending on how old they are, what their weight is, what their weight loss goals are, etc., etc. But how you fit that into a healthy, balanced diet is realistically, it's nigh on impossible, because even if that made up most of the calories you were having for the day, they basically come from junk food, and actually you're not going to be getting any of the nutrition that you need to really be living a healthier, happier lifestyle. You'll have got some calories, and you put in some calories and some fat and sugar and salt and all those things, but you don't really have fed the body what it needs to function. And we kind of also see this across the board. So you see this in the amount of calories and amount of sugar in fizzy drinks. You see it in the amount of calories and fat in cookies. A packet of cookies, the little small round ones that will come in a classic packet of biscuits, a whole packet of them is going to be close to 1,000 calories. I know a lot of clients that will put away a whole packet of these in one go or one sitting, because you kind of can passively eat them. And again, our perception on moderation is very, very out of step with the amount of calories, fat, sugar that they actually pump into a lot of the foods that we eat today. And again, it's the same thing. You've got an environment where your grandparents might be looking after your kids a lot of the time. They might think that they're giving them sweets and treats in moderation, but the perception for most people today is that moderation is out of context with the reality of the foods that are being served to us. You've only got to look at portion sizes that have got much, much bigger over the last 10 years or so. Now that transitions neatly and seamlessly into red cups. Now, red cups has been such an effective marketing campaign from Starbucks that even I'm referring to it just as red cups. And actually, the one I had today wasn't a red cup; it was a white one with a Christmas motif. It was quite cool, actually, quite a cool design. But I'm still referring to it as red cups. But yes, they are now selling their Christmas drinks, their Christmas selection, and this is exactly where our perception on moderation becomes a big problem, and it's where it becomes distorted. So let's take, for example, a Starbucks eggnog latte. If you have that in short or small in normal people language, that is going to set you back 169 calories. Okay, so not extortionately high, but again, this is quite for a coffee, which could be around 8 or 9. If you had a black coffee with no sugar, that's a lot more calories. Quite often people get caught out because they don't realize just how many calories, fat, sugar, etc. go into beverages and drinks in total or overall. So this can be quite often something that catches a lot of clients out. So a small or a short eggnog latte, which is one of their Christmas features, 169 calories, and it contains 6 grams of fat, and it also contains 13 grams of added sugar. Okay, so again, it's this little bad boy is not something that you can't have, because it's not about telling you things that you can't have, but actually it's about realizing that they do have a calorie content, they do have a sugar content, and importantly they do have fat content as well. Now this was just an eggnog latte, no cream, anything like that. This was just the straight drink as it comes. This was a single shot, but if you were to have the grande, or in normal people language, that's large, that will come in at 344 calories. That will come in at 12 grams of fat, and it will also come at 27 grams of added sugar. It also comes in as a double shot of espresso, which increases the risk of you not sleeping in the evening if you're drinking particularly after midday. Separate podcast for that one on caffeine. We should be doing that soon, but for today you can see the difference. 169 to 344 calories from the smallest to the largest of the eggnog latte. Now this kind of goes across the range. The hot chocolates contain a lot more, but again, you start throwing in marshmallows, you start throwing in cream, that number's going to go up and away. The sugars are going to go up, the fat's going to go up, the calories are going to go up. And again, this isn't about saying that you can't have them, but quite often people's perception on moderation and the reality of what the calories and the fats are is quite distorted. Now, moderation to my mind would be a short or a small eggnog latte, because that's 169 calories. You can build that into your day, especially if you're doing your exercising, if you've got your 10,000 steps up, if you manage to eat a a balanced diet for breakfast, you've had your snacks, you're not eating too much at lunch, and you keep your evening meal under control, you can build in 170, 200 calories to have one of these things, not affect your goals, and actually to keep you on the straight and narrow if that's how you like to see things. But the reality is, to know that is in moderation with your diet, you need to know how many calories go into these things. And the cakes, the drinks, and a lot of these things that we have eating on the go, eating and drinking on the go, really can undermine your goals. So if you're someone that has one of these, let's say through November and December, once a day on your way to work or on your way back from work, maybe you have 2 coffees a day at the train station. Are you building that into your goals? Are you building that into your calorie requirement? Because that could be anywhere from, say, like 350, 400 calories up to like 6, 7, 800 calories coming from like 2 drinks a day from the coffee shop. That is without anything else that you eat, and that is really what I'm getting into here, and getting on with the topic of basically not understanding what moderation means. Now, how can you make smarter choices? Well, you can choose the smaller size, that's for one. If you want to go super clean, then you could go for a green tea or a peppermint tea. If you still want your coffee hit, you can go for an Americano. Typically only contains around 9 calories. Size will vary that, but again, it's usually very, very low. That's sugar free or no added sugar in there as well. If you want to still have a coffee like a cappuccino or something like that, then always opt for skimmed milk or a dairy-free alternative. They tend to be a little bit low, although the sugar still can be quite high. Avoid the creams, avoid the marshmallows, and that just gives you a little bit of scope to basically have a drink, have what you want. And again, if it's later in the day and you've not been sleeping well, particularly if you're having a coffee after about midday, opt for a decaf. These are high-quality decaffeinated coffees that you're having in these coffee shops, and it's still going to taste just as good. It's still going to taste the same. You're still going to feel like you've had the same drink, but you're just not going to get that coffee hit. And some of you out there will be going, but I love the coffee hit, that's what keeps me going. It might be keeping you going, but it's keeping you going all night. It's affecting your sleep. You're going to be getting more cortisol release. You're not going to be getting the depth and quality of sleep that you want. That's going to affect your day, the following day, and it's mean you're going to be more likely to be storing your food as fat. Put simply, that is. Right, so that's red cups. That's our indulgent grannies. Making our children fat, and understanding the challenge of moderation and our perception on what moderation really is, and how moderation meets the real world in a very fuzzy grey area where most people don't have a good handle on what moderation looks like anymore, because most people don't take the time to actually see what the calorie, fat and sugar content of a lot of the foods that we eat are today. Now we're going to move on to the last part, and as I promised, I would tell you how to basically drink 12% less wine without any more willpower. Okay, so this is going to help you with your Christmas. This is going to get you set up so when the parties start, or when you're having your own parties and friends coming around, you can use some of these tips. Now, a study was carried out by Mr. Brian Wozniak, and I love his work. If you haven't heard of him, go check him out. He's very, very, very knowledgeable. And he basically did a study into happy hour drinkers, and he wanted to know how the drinking habits were affected based on the types of wines that they were drinking, red or white, the size of the glass, and basically how their drinking habits worked. And what they found was that people who drank from a taller, narrower glass drank on average 12% less than those that drank from a wider, shorter wine glass. And the reason for this is because in the wider, shorter wine glass, you can have the same amount of wine, but it will look more shallow in the glass. And visually, we like to see a glass that is full of wine, particularly in the UK. If you have a narrower glass, same amount of wine or less, looks like a very full glass. And this is actually something that your brain does, something that people did on average out of all of the people that they tested and studied, that people will drink 12% less on average in a narrower, taller wine glass. So throw out your big, poncy, lovely, posh, wide-bottomed wine glasses. They're making you drink more, and invest in some classic, normal people wine glasses that are a little bit narrower, a little bit shallower, and you're going to drink on average 12% less. Now, they also found that people that drank white wine versus red wine, the people that drank the red wine would drink on average 9% less than those that drank the white wine. And the reason for this is because it's all to do with our perception again. So visually, it is much easier to see how much you have in a glass if you have a red wine. However, if you have white wine in a glass, people can't visually see as easily, and therefore they're more likely on average to have 9% more wine than those that have red wine. So red wine in a shallow glass is the answer to your Christmas woes, a little trick that you can use there. And this goes on to another study which Brian also did, where he was looking at people's eating habits based on the plate size. So a very simple trick is to basically reduce your plate size at home, reduce your bowls. You're going to reduce your portion size immediately because we fill up the bowl or plate to suit the size. So your portion will fit to suit the size of the plate or the bowl. And this is kind of something you can passively do each day because you're going to save calories, you're going to save on portion size just because you're going to stop filling them up as much. So if your plates and your crockery are huge, get to the shops today, buy yourself some more. It's going to be one of the best investments you make for your health and a really, really simple one to do. But they also found that the colour had a big impact as well, and they tested, and basically if people had like a red pasta on a red plate, their portion size would be bigger compared to those that had a red pasta on, say, a white plate. Equally, they also found that those that had, say, a mashed potato on a white plate would have a bigger portion than those that had mashed potato on, say, a black plate. And again, the reason for this is all to do with how you see the food and the portion, and the contrast of the plate makes it easier for you to tell how much you've got on your plate, how much portion size is. Same with the wine. Red wine is easier to determine how much is in the glass, and there on average you're going to drink 9% less. So narrow a wine glass, save yourself 12%, drink yourself red wine, and that is 9% saved as well. Those are free. They are willpower free. You can use those. You can take them to the bank. You can take them to the Christmas bank of calorie savings. You're welcome, people. I'm going to be back next week, of course, in episode number 22. I'm going to give you some more top tips. But for now, is your granny making your children fat? Hit us up in the comments. Let us know what you think. Do you need to be maybe reconsidering your red cup selection? And what do you think about moderation? Do you think you've got a good handling of moderation? Or do you think that this is something that is maybe making your goals go a little bit by the wayside without you realizing? Either way, leave us a comment, leave us a thumbs up, leave us a little bit of love on social media, either over on our Facebook page. I'd love to get a review on there. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please head to the Fundamentally Fit Facebook page and leave us a review with a few comments about what you think about the podcast, or head over to YouTube or head over to SoundCloud. But until next time, I'm Andy Strong on the Fundamentally Fit podcast, helping you to eat smart, train smart, stay fundamentally fit, and I will see you in episode 22.